Good morning, Saints. Well, a lot of exciting things there with President Trump declaring Jerusalem is the undivided capital of Israel, and that we're going to move our embassy back there. I don't know if you guys caught it, but I think it was Czechoslovakia declared the same several hours after President Trump did. And so I don't know as of this morning if there's other countries that are going to follow suit. But as was, predicted, now we're supposedly entering 3 days of rage. And Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas is promising for 3 days of rage. So we'll see, if that's just the pretense they've been looking for to stir up another intifada against the Jews. I don't know. The point of this video, though, is kind of how people have been reporting on this whole situation from a biblical standpoint. I've gone to Zechariah 12 several times, and the thing that's compelling about Zechariah 12 is, God says he's going to make Jerusalem, a cup of trembling. Oh, that's ISV, but a cup of trembling unto all the people around about, that shall be in siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem, and a burdensome stone. And J.D. Frog teaches that stone there is the boundary stone, and that even though everybody that's trying to change the boundary stones, they're going to be cut through, and that is kind of what we're seeing, right? But the context of this is what got me this morning. And so I've been in here myself, and I've probably done videos talking about these same verses. So I just know that, I thought the same up until this morning. I was, doing a little coffee Bible study thing and looking at this. And a couple of things to point out is the context of this, of course, is more military. Matter of fact, in the ISV, verse 2, look, I am making Jerusalem an unstable cup toward all of its surrounding armies when they lay siege, and there's a military term against Judah and Jerusalem. And that got me thinking, it's like, okay, Lord, all the surrounding peoples do have some resentment against Israel, less so with Egypt because of the peace treaty, presumably, and possibly less so with Jordan because of the peace treaty, although this declaration from President Trump, one of the first people out of the gate, was Jordan's king. And so the context of this may be that all the people around are against them, and then it talks about when all nations are gathered against Judah and Jerusalem. Now, what triggered this whole thing? It was that the U.S. announced that Jerusalem was the eternal capital, undivided capital. I forget the words he used. And then, like I say, Czechoslovakia fell suit. And so not all nations are against Israel for right now. And so I was staring at this thing, and I thought, well, a couple of things aren't quite lined up. All nations aren't against. These aren't armies. It's a political thing right now, and a religious, right? But a political / religious, not a military kind of thing. And so I backed up because, context is king in biblical interpretation. I'm just going to show you, what was the first thing I stared at. The verse before it, you always back up because there's no chapter breaks in the original. So you got to figure out when is the theme ending from one thing to the next, or when does the vision, end for one thing and go into the next. And the prior verses, woe unto the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock, May the sword strike his arm and his right eye. May his arm wither and his right eye be completely blind. Now, almost every commentary you stare at, they point to that's likely the Antichrist. And we know that the Antichrist is first accepted by the Jewish people, and then he enters the temple, declares himself as God, the abomination of desolation. So that's midpoint tribulation stuff, right? What's the verse before this? For now I'm raising up a shepherd into the land who will neither search for the lost, nor care for the young, nor fix the broken, nor sustain the healthy. Instead, he will devour the meat of the best of the sheep, tearing off their hooves. And so here's the worthless shepherd rising to power, right? So I thought, boy, that's more midpoint of the tribulation than anything else. And right before that, what's the theme? I told him, if it's all right with you, pay me what I've earned. Well, this is, God talking about he had been shepherding the flock, and then pay me what I've earned. So they paid out what I earned, 30 shekels of silver. Then the Lord told me, throw the money into the treasury, that magnificent value they place on me. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them into the sanctuary of the temple. Then I broke my second staff, the one I named Union, breaking union between the house of Judah and the house of Israel. And then pick up the tools, the worthless shepherd. So, the prior thought there is God abandoning them, and he's pointing actually toward Christ, right, who was sold for 30 shekels of silver. I think that's an allusion so that when the Jews see the return of Christ, they know what they did. But, that's the oppressor, that's the worthless shepherd rising. So Zechariah 11 is really, this is midpoint of the tribulation. If the chapter breaks are removed, then what's going on in 12 here with these armies circling Jerusalem? Well, it's probably either at the point where the Antichrist comes to set up his kingdom in the seat of God, declaring himself as God, or maybe it's as late as the final battle there. But Armageddon, sorry, it took me a second to think that one out. But I think that you got to see that these are really in the second half of the tribulation period if you hold to the context. And then what do you see? Then, I'll pour out in the house of David, the residents of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and supplication. So now, we move forward. We're in Zechariah 12, second half, and they're going to get the grace of the Lord's going to pour out on them. The Spirit's going to pour out on them. That time, Jerusalem will mourn deeply, like mourning about Hadad Rimmon that took place in the plain of Megiddo. And so the land will mourn, all the families alone by themselves, the house of David by itself with wives. And so then they recognize what they did, right? And that the Lord was one that delivered, and that Jesus actually is what they're going to recognize, the one they have pierced, right? Right here, the one whom they've pierced. So context for me, saints, is that we shouldn't be going through and saying Zechariah 1 through 3 is fulfilled because of where it is context-wise in Zechariah's prophecy. Zechariah, I think the name means one who restores. And so I think, what God is doing is this is a message for the Jewish people. Zechariah prophesied during the post-exile period from the return from Babylon, right in the 520 BC time frame, right in there. And so, you've got the children of Israel coming out of the land of Babylon, out of the lands where they were scattered. They're back in the land, but things are very tenuous. And so what is he going to do? He's going to give them a picture of the final end for the Jewish people. and he's using the title the Lord of the Heavenly Armies, and he's going to restore all these things. And so, 8 and 9 is this picture, and 10 is this picture that's leading into the millennial reign when all these things are going to get restored. And that's, the namesake of Zechariah is pointing to that. And then when you get to 11, and he's going to say, here's the process of that restoration. First, you're going to see judgment because you rejected me, and the worthless shepherd is going to rule over you. And then you're going to woke up to what happened, right? And then I think, if this is like, for instance, the Battle of Armageddon, when all the nations of the earth are gathered around, if that's what this is, then the Lord of Heavenly Armies is going to deliver them. But when they do, they're going to see the return of the Son of Man, the one who they've pierced. So I just thought I'd point out that little Bible study, saints. Not that any of this is wrong, because the world has an unnatural hate for the children of Israel, for the Jewish people. And so that part all makes sense. But if you want to say Zechariah 12, 1 through 3 is fulfilled, I think you're kind of taking verses out of context. And so I thought I'd point that out. And it is very exciting, saints. I mean, everything we're seeing here with the Turkey switching sides. I mean, what's the first thing that happened after President Trump made his announcement? Literally, I think in the same hour that he did his press conference yesterday, Turkey's President Erdogan called for the Islamic nations to have a meeting, I think it was in Istanbul, next month to form a response to the U.S.'s declaration. Well, forget it if you think Turkey's part of NATO. They'll never cross sides and all that. They already have. They already joined Russia in Sochi to plan their alliance along with Iran. I mean, that was a mind blower. But then you saw yesterday, now Erdogan, who fashions himself as the king that's going to restore the empire, the Ottoman Empire, that ruled for 400 years there up until the early 1900s. He imagines that he's going to be the guy. Matter of fact, he's already declared himself as at least part deity. And so it's stunning where we are in terms of Bible prophecy. And so all these things are important because it does point to the very soon redemption of the church, saints. And so I'll leave you there, and God bless everybody. I can't believe, sort of, that we're still here, to be honest. This is pretty mind-blowing, but praise the Lord that, the fullness of the Gentiles, there's still people being saved up into this point. And so praise the Lord for that. I'm still praying for my family members, no doubt, that they make it before the rapture. I don't see a lot of sign of that, but I'm still praying every day, saints. And then, when we're taken, at least we have done our part, and it's all in the Lord's sovereignty in terms of who is in that fullness of Gentiles. So God bless.